Welcome to Minot Talk this Tuesday morning, 9 a.m.
Well, good morning.
It's good morning.
Welcome back, Jonathan.
That's right. I was gone Thursday.
You were.
I can't remember the days of the week anymore.
It's Tuesday now, I promise.
Tuesday. Okay, well, that's good to know.
We have Alderman Mike Blessum here, so it has to be Tuesday.
Yep. Good morning, guys.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
You excited about the season that we're about to step into, budget season?
Yeah. I mean, we're about, I don't know, a third of the way through already.
Exactly.
We've already had some stuff.
Yeah.
We got big meetings this week. We got some long sessions coming up last 3 days of this week, going through individual budgets, looking at them. So big part of the year for us right now.
Yeah, it feels a little segmented because of the mayoral race. Feels all messed up. And obviously, even if it was a standard one, we'd be just getting the new mayor would be getting into place right about now, like the next city council meeting or something like that is when they would be being established with the June election. Mm-hmm. And so it'd be a third of the way through. That's a lot. But this is, now you've made it through the entire cycle.
Yep.
Yeah, speaking of June, we're a year into your guys' term now.
We've had all of our meetings for a full year. So I was thinking about that on the way here this morning, and it's been an interesting ride. It's I would say the good news is I do find it rewarding. I feel like I'm making a difference, which is really what I wanted from the beginning. I remember sitting here talking to you guys during the campaign that, I felt like I had the skill to make a difference in this world, and I for better or worse, I think it is different. There's no question that whether it's the tone of the meetings or just the constraints that we're trying to pull on right now, I think are different than they were.
And that's good. That's good. Mm-hmm. Hopefully steps in a solid direction. All right, so let's first off jump off here. Just, you guys have had some a lot of 3-3 votes, which is
it is what it is. Yeah.
Is that gonna? Do you see this going on through budget season? Is this gonna be resolved after the mayor's race?
Well, the mayor's race doesn't solve it unless Josiah would happen to win.
Yeah.
If Josiah were to win, then we got a full council and away we go. I guess just being frank about it, I don't expect that. Josiah's a newcomer; he's not as well known. It's a tall lift tough lift for him to get there.
Short time.
So assuming that one of the other three would win, we'll have to go through a process then to get another council member appointed. It looks like by the way timing works and all of that, another election actually isn't possible.
Yep.
Yeah, it's just too close to that June election next year.
So my hope is that we can move through a process that would get somebody appointed. We would go through an application process like they did the last time. One of the big differences that I know, I think Miranda talked about it with you guys, is that I would fully intend to hear from the candidates this time.
For sure.
I want them at the podium telling us what their vision, what things look like. I think that was a misstep the last time that was happening, and I hope to do better this time.
That was surprising to hear that. It's not shocking that they held the meeting, but to hold it and then not allow anyone to speak, why even bother at that stage?
It gives you the sense that it's this behind closed doors way of doing things, and guys, keep in mind that's illegal. We can't sit together in a room with a quorum of the council and talk about those things. It's illegal. It has to be done in public.
An example is the mayoral debate we held. There was a little note that got posted on that door without us knowing, which was great. The city had to do it. There's a potential that there will be a quorum here, and then city clerk had to be there. So that way she knew when it started officially, and then she was able to watch online, so she knew when it ended officially, so she could make notes on it. Like, it's a big deal when you guys get in a room.
It is because we don't want that look, right? And again, it's not like at a meeting like that we can all show up at the same meeting. That's not an issue.
Yep.
We can't conduct city business. Obviously, we got to be very careful about that. But to me, the perception is the biggest thing.
Yes.
So that people understand that what they're seeing in our public meetings is the real discussion, and that's where that's occurring. Which is why, sometimes it can feel a little unfiltered and a little messy. But I think that's a consequence of being transparent. You have to do it that way. And so how this applies back to getting our seventh member on there, we're going to have to go through that process, and it's going to play out in public to a certain extent. And that's what's going to happen. Now, at the same time, I think, so the point is, once we get to 7, you don't have 3-3 votes anymore. Obviously, you're unless somebody's gone.
It'll fall one way or the other at that stage.
At that point, it's going to fall, and that's why there are a couple things that we've pushed off that we're going to come back to. The flock system was one of them. So there's a lot at stake with this seat. I think everybody understands that, and it's not to me. I'm looking for somebody who cares about the city, who's competent and able and willing to put in the time. Because in order to be a part of what's going on in the council, you've got to be willing to dig in right now.
Right.
Because there's a lot of information you need to be able to assimilate and get put together in your mind so that you can make coherent arguments and actually move the city forward the way that people are looking for.
Do you anticipate a round of 3-3 votes going when you're getting that seventh person in? Is there going to be a consensus that's even going to be able to be met?
I think that is a possibility, and the reason for that is, whether you think of it as factions or just the way people look at the world right now, you have blocking votes more than you have winning votes, let's say, right? So a 3-3 vote, this is a nuance of council business, but one of the points that we've been going through with the 6-member council is that it matters a lot who makes a motion.
Sure. Okay.
So as an example, the 3-3 votes that are killing things right now are generally the result of a motion that's coming from the more experienced council members.
Okay.
Where they're saying, yeah, let's go ahead with this, Safe Routes for All vote to give the consulting help to to the engineering department or whatever that is. If the motion was made instead to say we don't want to spend that money, now the 3-3 vote dies, and no action is taken. Also,
I see,
but it's the opposite outcome.
Yeah,
If you kind of follow where I'm going, there's some nuance there that goes into that. So that's why you don't typically have boards that are even numbers,
right?
Because it just doesn't work, and you don't actually get things done. So so I do expect on the vote to try to get a 7th member. Now the good news is maybe for those more centrists out there that just are looking for good government and things to get done, is that's going to lead us to a more consensus candidate.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so you're not going to get the extremes of say
one way or the other.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, the other part of it is that this person's going to serve for 10 months, and there'll be another election, and everything will shake out next summer.
Yep, makes sense. Except if, from our understanding, except if Fuller wins. If Fuller wins, it's a 2.5 month stint. We've gone back and forth on. Yeah, it's weird. I'm as stunned. I was very stunned.
It's just because he would have the following 2 years to fill out on the term. Then they would have to run for like a separate.
But is it? Doesn't he fill out the entire term of Fuller or no?
I think that's what we're working on trying to figure out is, do they fill out the entirety of those 2 years, or next June?
This was our example. We went back to, because I talked with the county
auditor.
No, I talked with the city
auditor. Okay,
city clerk, and we went back to Roscoe.
Yep,
he was appointed to fill out a term, and then Burlingham ended up filling it. And the reason why was because not because of the election. It was because the council said you'll only you'll be appointed to run until the next election, and then we'll vote on it. So if there's not that wording in there and Fuller wins, then that appointee would go for the full term of Fuller, unless if council said otherwise. It's basically my understanding.
And I guess, so if that's the case, then we'll go get it from legal and make sure that we understand where we're at.
Right.
If that's the case, I'll advocate for going before the people. I mean, I don't want a 6-member council choosing a person that's going to serve another
more than
2.5 years. Yeah, right.
So to me, it needs to be on the ballot next summer.
Right.
So I think it's pretty clear.
And that's an interesting thing too. Then, so you're going to if that were the case where Fuller wins specifically, you'll have the 3 open city council seats running for their full 4-year term.
Right.
Then you'll have a separate race for Fuller's to fill Fuller's vacated 2-year term. Right. So you would almost have to have if someone wanted that term specifically, they would have to run for it rather than just the city council in general.
And the mayor will be on the
ballot too,
no matter what.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing, and you guys raised something that I hadn't thought all the way through before, because so if Fuller is not the victor in this race in August, he just continues his term and nothing changes.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a simple one. If he wins, though, he then foregoes the remainder of his council term, which means there are 5 seats up next summer then, as long as we put that caveat in the motion to fill. So
it'll be a busy summer.
It will be a very busy summer. And really the other way to look at it is do we, are we able to bring forward, meaning we as a city, 5 quality candidates.
Right. Yeah.
For these seats,
Yep.
because that's, we need people that are willing to put in the time and the effort on this stuff.
Yep.
And to me, that's a big deal. What I'm finding is I generally do 20 to 30 hours a week. This week will be more like 40 just because of the budget meetings that we've got. People have to understand what that means and be willing to do the work, because that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, absolutely. Miranda Schiller says in most cases the seat is filled until the next election, which is the understanding that we were under too. But information we received from the city, it sounds like but I know that you guys will confirm that.
And like I said, we'll definitely confirm that. But I guess my commitment right now is to try to make sure that happens.
Yeah,
because I don't want someone serving in an appointed capacity any longer than we need to. I want the people to choose their leaders.
That makes sense. All right. So last city council meeting, there was some topics that came up that created or grabbed some attention. I don't know that they created controversy, but they grabbed some attention. One of them was the job court, the decision not to send a letter recommendation to the federal government, which is always an interesting deal when those requests come up. I know you stated and I read some of it on your post that you do on your Facebook page. You always do within about a week, you put out a post kind of explaining all the decisions that were made, which is great. So if you don't follow that, go follow that so you can kind of get some insight into that. But you put a little bit of background on why you came to this conclusion. If you wouldn't mind just going through that again a little bit.
Yeah. So I took a reasonable amount of heat for that decision over the last week here, which that's perfectly fine. That's the role I signed up for. A couple things that I'll say up front on this particular issue. Number one, the action we were taking in no way had anything to do with closing Job Corps. We don't have the power to do it. We can't do a motion to close the center. It's not ours, it's the federal government's. So that's number one. Number two, the letter itself, to me, the way that it was written wasn't particularly persuasive. It was politically driven. I mean, in one section of it, it said, hey, these Job Corps centers are in rural areas across the United States. This is written to President Trump. Are in rural areas, many of which are in counties that you carried during the election. And it's like, what are we even going for here? Number one. So let's just level set with that. That the letter wasn't going to do anything and wasn't headed anywhere anyway.
Well, even if it was sent, what are the odds anyone above a secretary of something reads it at that stage? I mean, it just is what it is.
And so that is what it is. Now let's break down though what actually is going on in Job Corps centers, because that's where my concern comes in. And I think if you look at the data, you look at the information that's out there. I was on with Joel Heitkamp late last week because this is his show out of Fargo, and there's plenty of people that are upset with us even suggesting that we would look at these programs.
One person in Fargo loses their job. So that was a big headline out in the forum.
Right? Yeah. And so, I've discussed this a lot, but the thing that I think people need to understand, number one, across the nation, these centers have a 38% graduation rate. Okay. So 38.
Low.
So relatively low to start with. Minot, sadly, is even worse. Minot's at 27%. Now, keep in mind just another little tidbit. It's fun to do it in this format because I can talk in a little more depth about what's really going on.
Right.
That's based on the way the study was done and the statistics they're using. Now, WIOA or something like that is the act that set this up, and it's set up a list of ways that you look at this. So that's the graduation rate under the way the act is written. What's referred to as traditional graduation rates, which I would assume is if you enter the program, how many of them make it to graduation, is just 20% in Minot. So now we're down to 1 out of 5. Okay, so that's the first thing. Number two, each student per year on average costs $80,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Per student per year, $80,000. That's about what Harvard costs per year.
Yeah.
Okay. We graduate them, and it's great. They might be a welder, they might go into a trade. That's a great thing. But the graduates average $17,000 a year. So if you lay that out, you're looking at $8.15 an hour.
Wow.
Now, I have a Starbucks cup. They're probably paying you $12 to start, maybe $15 or $16.
Right.
So there's all of those pieces that just don't add up for me. The program just isn't working as it's laid out right now. And then one other thing that I didn't talk about it in what I wrote online. I referred to it a little bit on the radio when I was on, but I'll give you guys a little other flavor of it. There's another section. This is all in a Department of Labor study.
Sure.
If you go onto my post on Facebook under my Alderman account where I put this out there, I link to the study from the Department of Labor. This is U.S. Department of Labor. And, people can say, oh, it's biased. It's the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Well, then it was biased when it was the Biden administration. It was biased when it was the Obama administration. It's what we have. The government puts out their statistics based on a study, and this is what it said.
Right.
In that, it also, after those financial issues, 200 million deficit going into 2025, it also laid out the issues going on in the centers.
Okay.
372 sexual assault cases in 2023. Okay, more than one per day all year long.
That's crazy.
Inside these centers. Something along the lines of 1,800 violence cases that were reported.
Yeah.
So what it all adds up to for me is that we certainly shouldn't be sending a letter to the federal government saying, hey, leave it alone, it's working great.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because that's what the letter was trying to do.
Right.
For me, I would rather stay out of that right now. Let the federal government work through this and hopefully improve it. Maybe they can get it to a point where it's workable again or revamp it, redo whatever. That's my hope.
Yeah.
But certainly sending a letter saying, hey, leave it alone isn't on my set of tasks right now.
Yeah.
So it needs to be revamped and fixed.
And this is strictly hypothetical. I don't think there's any kind of steam for this, but say the state, would the state be able to take it over if the federal government allowed that? Would you be interested in something of that nature?
Well, one of the things that I wrote about is the way that I put it is, if this was a state or local program, some public funds could make sense here. But if it was, and it was successful, it was financially successful, and it was successful in placing people and getting them into the workforce rather than headed down a bad path, then we've got something great to talk about. Yeah. Right now, the state of North Dakota has a lot of resources, and when we balance all of the different things we're spending money on, I might choose these types of programs over some of the stuff Commerce does to throw money at business.
Yeah,
right.
The truth.
And that's from a Republican. I mean, I'm right of center. I mean, I'm a guy who would is pro business, but I'm not pro business handout.
Right. Yeah.
We need to help people. That's what our tax dollars. If we're going to do it, let's do it. But we need programs that work and that are successful both financially and in the work that they're trying to do. And short of being able to do that, I can't support this as is. I hope there's nobody out there that looks at this and goes, yeah, we shouldn't touch it. It should be left as is. I just don't see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, and it seems like if there's a local touch point to it, then it would create better. Because right now the accountability is held to the federal government, which is very distant,
especially from here. Yeah.
Right. And it seems like if they're in rural areas across America, it's going to continue to be distant. I'm sure there's people that monitor or whatever that will have see it from a at large perspective, but we actually feel the effect in the community, and even North Dakota feels the effect in the community.
Right.
So if there's some money put there, then they can be like, well, we're going to continue to put money in, but this has to be improved if we're going to continue to do this. Not just looking at these overall statistics where it falls in our whatever model that we have, so it's still all right. And then at this point, when it becomes financially unfeasible for the federal government, we just cut funding altogether. Right. It seems like there might be a better model.
Well, and the other thing to keep in mind here is that this was sort of a nothing burger in terms of the council, because we weren't taking any real action.
Exactly.
This is a letter buried inside the city manager's update, all of those things.
Yeah.
But for me, the good thing about it statewide is that it kicked off a bunch of conversation. It got people actually talking about this and going, well, wait a second. When I was on with Joel Heitkamp, because I had sort of a command of what was going on in the program itself and from the Department of Labor study, there really wasn't a whole lot that he could even say to defend it. I mean, really, you got to back up and say, look, emotionally, I think it's a good thing, and I want to be able to help people that really need it. But there's some big concerns here that need to be addressed. And until those are addressed, I don't see how we can move forward with it. The other thing that I'll point out is that we do have great options out there that are not just this program. I mean, the one that I talked about on that show was, the electrical union in Minot has a great apprenticeship program. And you can go to work directly for them and get that going and get placed into one of their member firms and have really, in my opinion, one of the best careers you could find in the trades.
Right. Yeah.
You come out of there at, I think they're at somewhere around $18 an hour now to start when they hit the apprenticeship program, headed for 40, 50, 60
Yeah.
bucks an hour.
yeah,
when you're a
upwards of that
journeyman.
even.
Like
Yeah.
it's
With
a
unlimited
great
hours.
path.
Yes.
And as you look at that, those are options that are available that are actually driven by the private sector.
Yeah.
You know, in this case, a union that's pushing that forward and trying to make that happen. The other thing that people were throwing out on the Fargo station was, you know what used to do this? The military.
Oh, interesting.
There were, whether it was a judge, it was a prosecutor that would say, look, here's your choices.
Yeah.
You can spend the next 2 years in the county lockup, or you can join the Army.
Yeah.
Which would you choose?
Right, yeah.
And we don't do that today. I mean, the military today has got a little bit different set of,
Yep.
of requirements and all those things. But there were whole generations of young men in particular that were headed down a bad path,
Yep.
got pushed and moved into the military and got the structure and the sort of gumption
Right.
drilled into them
Yeah.
by that drill sergeant
Right.
that turned them into productive citizens.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're all looking for here, right?
At the end of the
Nobody
day.
wants these people to be on public assistance or you know, in jail for their lives.
Right.
Nobody wants it. We can all agree that that's the case. The question is, what's the right way to go about it? And I would submit that right now, this has not been the right way for a while, at least. And
Sure.
and until we can fix that, I can't see voting to support it this way for sure.
Right.
You know, if somebody wants me to be a part of trying to help it, I'm happy to do that. But that's where we sit right now. It's not viable.
Right. Yeah.
And one thing before we kind of probably move off this, you mentioned on the emotional side of it. I think one of the biggest things that hit people was just how fast it all happened when the
Yeah.
when the pausation took effect. It was what, like maybe a 10-day kind of notice thing. I think that's one of the things that people got a little bit worked up about too.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's been kind of a hallmark of this administration,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and in some ways you could say, oh, it's sort of gut reactions. It's they're flailing about to a certain extent, and I think everybody kind of sees that right now. At the same time, you have to come to a reckoning with the pieces that are not working well, and adjust. And you know, sometimes government moves way too slow.
Right.
You know, sitting and studying this for 5 years and then deciding that, oh, maybe we should make a couple adjustments here and there isn't going to cut it. To me, we have to get these on track now because they're not helping the people they're meant to help.
How many months do you go in the red in business before you either maybe you're intentionally going in the red because you know it's going to pay out, or you're like, no, we're just done.
Right.
You go like 2 or 3 months and you're like, we're going to change something now.
Well, and it's a good point. Typically, whether it's your own funds or it's a bank's funds or whoever it is, you've got the people that have a stake in your business in that situation.
Yeah.
They're going to want their return, or they're at least going to want it to be solvent.
Right.
Here, the taxpayer through layers of government is the bank,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And so there's nobody really to hold anybody accountable here. Who do we hold accountable for Job Corps not performing well? Yeah, I don't know.
Right. Yeah. No, it's true. Okay. Obviously, we kind of teased it at the beginning, heading into budget season. Well, and you corrected it. We're a third of the way through here. Get up to date here, Johnny. But what are some of the priorities that you're looking at? Obviously, last budget season, you guys were able to take the extra money from that budget and give that back to the taxpayers, which lowered the mills and now has created a new precedent for this budget cycle. Fatch probably a little bit less there. What's some of the priorities as you head into this budget season?
Well, the big priority for me is that we get on a new footing or a new trajectory with how we go about this. And that's one of the things that city staff have done a great job with. Harold Stewart, the city manager, leading the way, working with Dave Lakefield in the finance director's office. You know, they've worked with the department heads based on council direction. You know, Alderman Pittner brought forward the motions, and we concurred with those to ask the city to prepare a flat budget that's flat to the 25, one that goes down by 3%, and one that goes up by 3%. Now, if you think about that, those are tall tasks, because if you just normal inflation on our wages is typically, you know, at a minimum probably 2%, but you know, last year our raises were about 5%. You know, the city's proposal was more like 7%. So those are a tall task. So to me, the bigger thing is getting on a new process that takes them through those steps, a multi-year process that says, hey, tell us about 26, 27, and 28. What does all your trajectory look like? How do you hold it flat, you know, actually shrink it or grow it? And so it's going to give us a lot of information about how the process works. So that's the first thing. Beyond that, then, we have new priorities that were set by the state. So,
Right, yes.
the those that fought against Measure 4 really wanted to make sure that local control was preserved and that all decisions were made locally. Well, we got the exact opposite of that,
Right.
because the legislature decided that they're going to cap our spending growth, or I should say our levy growth is a better way to put it,
Sure.
at 3%. And so that's not local control.
Right.
That's the big hand of government from Bismarck swooping in and saying, no, here's what you're going to do. Now, in Minot, we're able to handle that. We have our budget's big enough. We have different sources of revenue. We can move things around to make sure that we're able to meet that. But I don't understand how small entities are going to be able to do this.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about a $220 million budget. We're talking about a levy that's, somewhere in the $20 to $28 million range typically. We can work with that. Someone whose levy is,
Less than
$840,000.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a whole different ballgame for
changing
them.
that by 3%.
That's
I
crazy.
mean, just isn't anything. So,
Yeah.
what I believe is going to happen is that essentially every local entity in the state that has levy authority is going to grow by exactly 3% from here on out.
Right.
Now, you can make the case that, hey, that's better than it has been, which is
Yeah.
probably true.
Right, yeah.
It's gonna limit things. It's gonna do what the legislature wanted, but it's gonna be completely artificial. So rather than letting elections solve our issues and letting electing the right people solve the problems that we've got, now you're going to have local officials that are going to feel constrained and have to do this. So
Yeah.
again, you guys saw the effort that I put into the budget last year in trying to pull that back, whether it's using reserves, going with the hybrid pay plan to pull that back a little bit.
Right.
I believe we were doing the things that were moving things in the right direction, and we intend to do that again this year.
Yeah.
I think as a council as a whole, we see the writing on the wall with where we've got to get to. So, priority-wise, that's where that's got to be. Priorities always got to be on the fundamentals of the city, public safety, police, fire. We got to make sure that that's working correctly. We got to make sure that we're taking care of streets and infrastructure.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of our focus is going to be and has to be when we prioritize our funding levels. All now with the new constraint that we can only grow it by 3%.
Yeah.
So, it's going to be an interesting path. By the way our system works, we get all the input, we give input back to the department heads. Harold takes all of that at the city manager's office to create his budget.
Okay.
And his budget typically is a starting point. Now, there is another path where the president of the city council also can write a full budget, top to bottom, if
Gotcha.
they choose to. That's typically taken the form lately of a letter outlining some ideas, and I expect that that's what will happen again this year. We're in a bit of a unique spot,
Right.
Because
Mayor.
the president is now the acting mayor,
and is
So-
also running for that role. Yeah,
exactly.
it's-
And so I believe, and again, don't quote me on this. I believe what Alderwoman Lisa Olson and the acting mayor Mark Janser, I believe they're working together to do
Okay.
that, which I
Okay.
think
Right.
is a great solution.
Yeah,
because
that'll be great.
It still gets input from council leadership, the elected council leadership. And my hope is that they lay out some priorities that we can align to and try to hold the staff budget to that direction. And hopefully it all works its way towards a number by the early part of October.
So when you look at budget, obviously you guys are looking at a multi-year viewpoint of this, where you have concerns that you're trying to address over several budgets. Is it to get property taxes to zero? Is it to what's the actual end goal that you see that yourself working towards as you go through these budget processes year over year?
Yeah. So one of the I guess one of the things I think I've said multiple times from the council is that government exists, in my mind, to provide service, a specific set of services at break even.
Okay.
Right? We should take in exactly what we need to pay for those services and no more, and execute those services in as excellent a way as we can for
Right.
the people. Right? So there we're talking about we need, when you turn on the faucet, we need clean water to come out. Right? When you call 911, you get the appropriate service coming to help you. And just also when things happen, whether there's an accident or whatever it is, you want public safety to perform. We want roads that are good. We don't want potholes everywhere. We want to spend an appropriate amount on keeping that up and trying to start to get ahead of it. And then, we have infrastructure costs.
Right.
We've got, we got a lot of old pipe in the ground right now that we're having to replace. We've got flood infrastructure. We've got all these pieces. So when I think of priorities, that's what I look at. So it's not it's not just, oh, we got to find a way to lower the levy. My point is that we need an appropriate level of service that the people are willing to pay for, and
Right.
then we need to tax them for that.
I see.
And one of the things that I've been beating the drum about, and I'm going to continue to do it through this budget cycle, is that we've now gone 7 straight years. I assume it'll be 8 because we'll get the latest one. I haven't analyzed it close enough to know for sure yet. But we've gone 7 straight years making a profit at the city.
Right.
Okay. For our businesses, small business owners,
Great.
you want a profit. That's
Yeah.
what you want, right? If you bring in more revenue, your costs come in a little less than you thought.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yes.
That's what we want. In government, that's not the right approach, though. When that happens, the people have been taxed too much. Okay, so that's why, for me, while we may think of it as giving reserves back, that's not exactly the point. Even last year when we did that, that was actually returning a specific overage related to bringing in too much.
Right.
And we need to continue to look at that year by year by year, because if the 2024 operation of the city brought in more money than it spent, that money is available to give back immediately.
Right. It's kind of like the old tax return. People get excited in April because, oh, yeah, the government gave me a $5,000 check back. No, you gave the money that they borrowed it.
Money.
Yes.
Yep.
And the point of it, there's a lot of different examples of this, but the easy one that I usually give people is, our police department has been sort of chronically understaffed for a while now. And in the 24 budget, we actually did something about that in terms of dollars.
Yep.
We actually, instead of saying, oh, we're 16 police officers short, still charge the people for the 16, even though we know we can't hire them.
Yeah.
Bring in that money, and then, if we don't use it, we just let it be in the general fund, and
Right.
we've got extra
Throw
things
it in
we can do
reserves.
down the road. No, last year what we did is we cut that in half, roughly, if I remember the numbers right. So we funded 8 additional police officers.
Yep.
The other 8, with the understanding that if we need them, we're going to hire them.
Yeah.
And if we have to do budget amendments to pay for it, we'll go ahead and do that because we're at the authorized number. But the point is, I don't want to charge the public for a 24-pack of Coke and then hand them 12 cans.
Right, yeah.
I mean, that's not okay.
Right.
So we need to be very, very upfront and transparent about how we budget and the dollars, because the point of it is, when we get to the end of the year and we say, oh, look, we saved you all this money, we came in under budget. Well, no, they still got charged for it already.
Right. Yeah.
It'd be a different thing if you did that and then at the end of the year you said, okay, now here's your tax bill. It was lower than we thought because we didn't spend it.
Yeah.
It'd be a whole different question.
Right.
But that's not how it works.
Yep.
We do it up front. We bill it as we go.
Right.
And oh shoot, yeah, we charge a little too much. But as Alderman Pittner would put it, he would rather see us reinvest that in something, whether again, good things, whether it's roads or equipment or buildings or whatever that is. My thought would be, if we pulled in too much, we give it back.
Right.
And that's I guess that's just a little difference of
Of philosophy. Yeah, for sure.
So before we probably go to break, on the flip side of that, what happens if, say, we get this evened out a little bit more, but then all of a sudden it starts running into a deficit? Maybe not, by millions by any means, but $50,000, $150,000 a year kind of thing.
But even $500,000,
or even if you start getting,
even if it's millions.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. So right now, last year, as we got out of last year, we were over $40 million in reserve in the general fund alone. Okay, there's other funds too. It's not just the general fund, but we're over $40 million. One of the things I asked during last year's budget process in the October meeting, where I did a series of motions to try to set up our budget future, I asked for a new set of guardrails on our reserve totals, and in the general fund in particular. And that finally came up on council 2 meetings ago. And we had the discussion. We talked through, what should it be? The proposal from staff was, well, actually, we should expand it, if anything, and we need to spend, we need to have the ability and the flexibility to spend what we need. So we're going to go all the way up to state law, which is 75% of the year. So think of it this way. If you have a $20 million general, or let's say a $60 million general fund budget, state law will allow you to have in reserve up to 3/4 of that. So about $45 million. Okay. That's the upper bound. In state law, there is no lower bound, but council precedent has been 1 month, and then they've sort of said, I think that's what's in ordinance, and then they've sort of said, well, we don't really want to go below 3. So my proposal and the motion that I brought was to move that to keeping us between 3 months and 6 months worth of reserves. So 25% to 50%, which to me, if you've got a $60 million budget holding $30 million in reserve, for that rainy day when,
Yeah.
oh shoot, sales tax didn't come in the way we thought, we're a little behind. Well, we got the reserve. That's what it's there for. Back to something that Alderman Pittner said when we had the Broadway Circle issue and they had to use reserves to do that. That's what reserves are for.
Right.
Okay. I might disagree on that one, but the point is that those decisions get really easy when there's a huge pile of money sitting there.
Yeah,
sure.
A decision to spend $1 million or 1.4 million when you've got 40 million in reserve looks a lot different if you've got 20.
Yep.
And that's why, to me, we need to pull those guardrails back. The council didn't agree on that, and that's one I fully intend to revisit that at some point in the future when we've got a council that may be more amenable to it. Because to me, that's one of the biggest issues we have dollars-wise right now is it's too easy to spend money when we got too much of it sitting around.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that's fair.
Very good. You want to go to break and come back?
I'm ready if you are. Yeah, go for
Well,
it.
hey, let's do it then. We'll be back in just over a minute.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes, pun intended.
Enjoy Minot's finest authentic Mexican cuisine with a view at Mi Mexico. The rooftop patio is open and ready for you to enjoy a margarita or other cool refreshment along with genuine mouth-watering Mexican entrees. Mi Mexico, South Broadway.
All right, we're back. Good Me Mexico ad.
I love it every
love it,
time.
of course you
Every
do.
time.
Good.
You guys been upstairs yet?
I haven't.
I haven't made it up there yet.
We've
No,
been up there a
But
couple
it's-
times. It's
it
fabulous.
looks. It's
You got to catch the right night because windy
It's North
South
Dakota.
Hill, it can be kind of tough.
because it's right on top of the hill there.
But it's beautiful though. We've sat up there a couple times. It's awesome.
Yeah, really nice venue in there for sure. One other thing that kind of popped up recently that, again, you guys discussed last Monday, but it's getting a lot more steam coming into this weekend, was the whole situation with the fire department grant that was originally going to come from the national level. It was going to pay 100% for 3 years for new employees for the fire department. Lo and behold, when the grant got finalized now, it was more of the city had to contribute a certain percent. It was like, 25% the first year, and it would gradually go up. And so now, lo and behold, this isn't initially what we planned for, and you guys ended up rejecting it at this point, or at least rejecting the application to go out on it.
Right. So, this actually goes back to a CPSM study that was done on both the police department and the fire department to help understand, how are they being operated versus, nationwide norms and best practices. One of the things that came out of that study is that our firefighters and again, I am not an expert in their world. Right. So a lot of the stuff we work with Chief Kelly to understand what they're talking about. But on our trucks, we typically run 3-person crews, CPSM, that tells us that the correct way to do that is 4-person crews. Okay. And so, we have to look at that and say, okay, that's for safety. That's the best thing. It's the right way to go. It's just like our homes, right? If money's no object, right, what's the right way to protect your home, whether it's from intruders or tornadoes or whatever it is, right? Yep. The trouble is that money is an object here. That we do have to keep that a part of the equation. So last fall, when this came before us to go after this SAFER grant, as you mentioned, it was 3 years covering all of their wages for those 3 years. And so it was a way for us to ease into this. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that in fire departments, you don't add one person ever to regular crews. And the reason is shifts. Okay. So at the very least, you're doing them in sets of 3 because you need to cover, right?
I see. Yep.
And then once you do that, we've got 5 stations. So if you're going to do that, now hiring one actually means 15.
Wow.
Okay. And that's why you always have to keep that in mind throughout. And so when we were talking about this last fall, when we first gave the authorization to go after the SAFER grant, that was one of the things I tried to point out to my colleagues on council is that, yes, it's great. We get 3 years worth. That's all a good thing. But we are now literally signing up for $1.5 to $2 million per year going forward for these new firefighters. if that is our priority, if we're saying around the dais that this is what we intend to do, this is where we need to spend our money, we better figure out where it's going to come from, because what I tried to help them understand is I'm not going to authorize just brand new spending and new taxation to do it.
Right.
We're going to have to find ways in our priorities then to pull down in other places.
Yeah.
And you know what? The council moved forward, said, go ahead and go after the grant. Let's do it. We think it's the right thing to do. Let's keep our firefighters safe, which I think we can all agree with. So fast forward now to this spring, and we're actually going through the process while the federal government that was working on this has changed the way the grants work.
Yeah.
Now the grants require a 25% local match in years 1 and 2, and it goes up to, I believe, a 65% grant in match in year 3. So they've lessened the pot, you know, and it puts a lot more burden on us locally. And so, you know, in the debate this week or last week, I guess, the city manager came right out and said, "Look, it doesn't work with the budget. We're already far enough down this path that if we have to add this back in," keep in mind, the dollar amount that we're talking about here not only would have broken the fire department's budget for 26, it would have broken the entire city's budget
At that stage.
and
3%.
put us in a spot where we can't stay under the 3%.
Yeah.
So in some ways, it was very close to a no-brainer. This wasn't just, oh, you know, let's just do it. Now, there are a couple members of council, and there's a couple of them that will choose to typically kick the can down the road just a little to see if something new comes up. And that's okay. There's no issue with that. At the same time, we've got too much of that going on, I believe, because it leaves staff running around trying to solve things and trying to do things that just aren't feasible.
Right.
I mean, the Ann Street Bridge is an example of that. This is certainly another one. Whenever we just say, well, let's give it a little more time, let's let the process play out and see, we can say no down the road. Sometimes decisive action is just better. It just helps people understand the playing field and lets us get past something. And I believe this is one of those. So, you know, for me, you know, it was a 4-2 vote to just say, nope, we're not going to go forward with it right now. It doesn't fit the budget. While we may want these long-term, this isn't the method that's going to get us there right now in the financial situation we're in. So again, it's another one of those that once you work yourself through the sort of logic puzzle that we have on a lot of these, applying the philosophical thought to it, the answers are pretty straightforward for me usually. Right. It's really just trying to articulate that so the public understands it as well as the rest of the council as I'm trying to make arguments.
Yeah.
And that led to an interesting secondary conversation too about how to prioritize between, does the city want to try to hire more firefighters, or do we want to try to relocate one of the fire stations that we have to better cover some of that southern part of the city area over there?
Well, the fire chief, Kronschnabel, is you know, that's one of her priorities, and that was the answer that she gave, is that, and I think if you think about it, right now we are covering, say, the Hovind School and the Beowulf Club area now. We're covering that with Station 1, which is next to Office Max.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
So
that's a huge
you know,
stretch.
you've got to fire is all about time. It's all about how quickly can you get there. Now, so the idea in my mind has always been, can we put a station along 37th? You know, think of the lot, say, just to the east of Walmart.
Sure.
You know, there's an open lot right there. That to me sort of seems like a prime spot. You're right along 37th. You've got access to everything out there. You're on the south side of the bypass at that point. So you've got some options. The issue with it is, what now happens to Edison?
Sure.
Is Edison now a black spot? And so we've got to be careful about this. We've got to be really smart about how we go about it. I am generally in support of the chief's thought process here. Yeah. And I think part of the 26 budget will be to look at land. I think that's part of our discussion on the SIP, the capital improvement plan, talked about this a little bit. But we have to give that some serious study, because we've got to understand, are we leaving a hole there? Because what I don't want this to be is, oh, we built a new station on the south end along 37th, but oh shoot, now we left a hole. Now we got to leave one open anyway. Yeah. Station 1 at Office Max.
I see.
And so it's not that we were planning to give up that property or that land in the first place, although you always want to think about that. But it was going to be repurposed. And what I don't want it to turn into, well, shoot, we actually need a 6th station now. Right. Because as soon as you need a 6th station, you're looking at probably 15 staff members to staff it.
And it's almost impossible budget-wise.
Yeah.
Like when not because you wouldn't want to do it, but because of the cap now.
Right.
So even if you wanted to do this hiring, like if you don't use that federal grant, it's impossible.
Yeah. And on that point too, how then with the cap now, does the city try to prioritize? Do we want to try to find a new fire station first, or do we want to try to revamp our police department first? And maybe they can be done simultaneously, but it feels like that might be one of those things that's going to have to pick one over the other to start. I mean,
and so here's I think here's an easy way for everybody to think about this as we go forward. When we go to do buildings, if we're able to do that without impacting staff, those can be handled through whether it's infrastructure funds or improvement funds, sales tax funds that are coming in a different way. The moment that we head into more staff, we are directly on property tax, especially in fire and police. So the way that I think of it is, with the current staffing with police, if we want to revamp their building, which is where we're leaning right now, I believe, we'll spend a lot of money there. But that will be to house the same staff that we're already funding through property tax. It's for the operations part of it. You know, this is a place where having the finance director work with the council to set aside the funds. We likely would have what we need to do those renovations. Now, we don't have what we need to do a $50 million new, law enforcement center on the south end of town. That's off the table. I mean, really. So the budget constraint really gets into operations and what the ongoing year by year gets to be, which you can typically think of as staffing more than anything else. Okay. Now, you do have some pieces, maintenance, whether it's maintenance of the building, utilities, all the other pieces, those would hit the property tax side, but the building being built itself has other sources that we can go into.
Okay, that's a plus, and especially with, I know some of the sales tax, hopefully the NAS part of sales tax is finally wrapping up here this year, maybe next year, and we can start dipping into that in a different way.
To shift it directly over to flood.
To be fair,
just to be honest about it, that is what's going to happen. I think people need to understand that because, I look at it, I'm 51 years old. We will be paying for flood the entire rest of my life. The question in my mind is, my children who are in their mid-20s, will they be paying for it the rest of their life? I believe they probably will as well. Right now we're looking at bonds that are heading towards 2080 for them to be completely taken care of. So flood is going to be a burden on the city for most of our current residents' lives. That's how that's going to be, and it's part of the trade-off that we have to try to protect. I think you guys were talking over the last week or so here about we're now headed into territory where we're paying more for the fix than the problem was. And again, I'm not saying we don't do it or that we shouldn't do it, but we all have to keep in mind what this is costing us. We are very close to one full penny worth of sales tax that's going here that could be helping us in a multitude of other ways.
Just feels like at this point, regardless of anything, the sooner it gets done, the better. And obviously that's not going to be a cheap thing to happen, but it's one of those, if it can get finished, that, bare minimum, it eliminates any future bonds getting thrown into the situation.
And that's the idea. At least then we sort of have our entire mortgage out there, and we know what the payment looks like going forward. Right now, our mortgage is being added to as we're going here, and we're issuing new bonds and taking on new debt all the time.
I hate it when that happens.
Exactly.
Not just a second, but a third and fourth mortgage on the same house. What the heck?
It's not healthy. Banks don't like it. All right. We've chatted city. Let's talk just for a couple minutes. We got about 12 minutes left about some state stuff that's going on. First off, and Kyler, you should lead on this because I'm not as knowledgeable, but the Freedom League.
You guys are starting a new little. Don't want to more of a caucus, I guess. Probably it's not a party by any means. It's I think that'd probably be how I would define it. Called the Freedom League in the Republican Party here in the state, trying to get some better training incentives out for different people throughout the state.
So for the last roughly 5 years, I've been working with, large groups of grassroots conservatives in the Republican Party across the state on not just me, but teams of us, lots and lots of people working on trying to pull the Republican Party back to its platform roots and make sure that we're focused there. When we get super majorities in both houses of the legislature, you have every statewide elected official that are all Republicans. It's easy to get complacent. It's easy to let sort of mission creep come in and get us away from where we really ought to be as a party. The party is a very defined platform that's very good. It lays out many of the things that a lot of us would agree with on my side of the aisle, and that is our baseline. And so what the Freedom League is formed to do is to advocate and continue pulling in that direction. And really, at the end of the day, the main point of it is to get boots on the ground. It's to get to get the funding sources coming in, to get the momentum behind it so that we can hire a full-time executive director. That person can be on the ground doing training across the state, growing new Republican leaders and getting them ready for service, growing legislators, advocating at the Capitol during session. There are some very good examples we have out there of organizations. The one that I always use is Farm Bureau. Farm Bureau, excuse me, Farm Bureau has their executive director on the Capitol grounds every single day of the session, and he'll be in and out of committee hearings, and he will simply go to the microphone for 30 seconds and explain to a committee that this bill that you're about to take up aligns with our platform or our resolution set, and we are urging a yes vote or a do pass vote on this bill. And they know him. He's a fixture of coming through, and the committees then always know where Farm Bureau stands on each individual bill. And that's a little bit of the vision that we have here, really from a sort of grassroots conservative point of view. And so that's really where we're headed. I'm excited about it because it's something that's been percolating for a couple of years. And a lot of the activities, whether it's training, just advocacy, were happening behind the scenes. This is meant to formalize that and turn it into something that's going to actually move.
I see. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, no, I think that's exciting principle that could transform into going forward.
Did you guys have any impact or any concern or any whatever the right word is to use concerning the recent election for the state party chair?
So the Freedom League is relatively new. I think our launch date was in June,
less than a month,
not even a month ago. And so not directly that way, but all those principles and all that stuff that I just talked about, doing the statewide advocacy, working district by district by district, helping to get conservatives elected into district positions, all led directly to that. So as I said, for the last 5 years, there's been a group of us that have been working on these things. That has led directly to, in 2023, having Sandy Sanford get elected at the state committee to be the chair. That was a change. Her defeating Perry Schaefer for that role was a big deal at the time by one vote, 29-28.
That's crazy.
In Fargo in 2023. Fast forward to this year, and there's another new election. We go through the entire reorganization process this spring, elect 47 new district chairs, actually 46 because we had an issue in District 25, but 46 new leaders to come together and reorganize the entire state party to elect another new chair. And in this case, a friend of mine, Matt Simon, from the Bismarck area, won the state chair, and that's a big deal. It signals another sort of new day within the Republican Party and a new direction. And I think over the next couple of years, my hope is that we'll see a party that's more involved in policy rather than just making sure that people have R's behind their name when they get elected.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what the party's kind of become. And what we would really love to see is that we get more effective public policy out of it, because that's what all this is for. It's not just a country club. It's not so we all pat each other on the back and say, hey, you're a good Republican just like I am. It's more saying, are we getting good public outcomes for our money here?
Yeah.
Because I think that's been the issue.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the Republican Party in North Dakota, we've offset it. It's so weird. But you go and you talk with, had a talk with the former chair, and it's like, yeah, you would be surprised at how low our membership is because people aren't a part of it. So you lose that club, but then you have also what you're talking about of people that they get their names, their rhinos, or whatever the going label is for them. People that just feel like they vote line or they vote very much together on stuff.
Well, and
sometimes
it's the
even
Big
left.
Tent concept, right?
Sure.
I mean, that
That's
the
the killer
Republican
right
Party,
there.
that was the path out of the minority,
Right.
When Ed Schaefer
Was
kind of
governor and
pulled the party in that
You're right.
direction. You have to add from the sides, to your party to make sure that you get there. One of the other things, you mentioned talking with Sandy. One of the great things that Sandy did on the way out, and we thank her for her service. She served a very important role at an important time in our party, and she was a candidate and a leader that did a nice job of getting the processes and the organization running in the right direction. And now she's passed it off to new leadership. But one of the things that she did as she departed is she left a set of ideas and a direction forward that I think is phenomenal. You know, it does talk a lot more about working with the legislature to hold them accountable to the platform ideals that we have. You know, the things that bring us together as Republicans, that's what we should be seeing in public policy.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that the new leadership now will take that up. You know, she put the effort into that to get it ready, and the new leadership will take that up so that we start seeing more outcomes that the conservatives in the party would be proud of going forward.
Absolutely.
That's fair. One last one before we kind of probably start wrapping up. What's the situation with District 25? Are they going to get a chair appointed anytime soon? Or
So a real quick synopsis of what
Yeah.
happened. So in state law, district parties have between January 1 and May 15th to reorganize every year. So the idea is they come together into caucuses and then do an election for a district chair. That district chair in North Dakota politics actually has a lot of power.
Yeah.
And we'll get to why this is really important in just a second here. But District 25 had until May 15th to reorganize. They failed twice during that period. And what I mean by failed is they held reorganization meetings that didn't follow state law, didn't follow Republican Party rules, and didn't follow their own bylaws. And when that occurs, they are deemed to have not reorganized. And so in the eyes of the state party, they have not reorganized. So there is no duly elected district chair in District 25. Now, that matters to a certain extent. There's local things you do. You vote on the state committee. You vote for the state chair.
Yeah.
But the more important role of the district chair and the district committee is in the case of a vacancy in the legislature,
Yeah.
which we had twice during this session.
Right.
We've now had a third one, and there's potential for a fourth as well. They are the primary drivers of appointing a new
replacement. Yep.
And so, you know, in the case of Republican Josh Christie in District 27, who passed away during the session, you know, my friend Amy in District 27 is the district chair there when he passed away. Her committee then made a selection of TJ Brown to send to Bismarck. And it's that committee, it's a group of 50 people that decide that. So there's an immense amount of power. And just, you know, kind of like the way the city works, he will serve there to serve out the end of that term, and then he'll go before the people. So that's the issue we've got right now. Cindy Schreiber-Beck, a longtime Republican legislator from District 25, passed away a couple weeks ago. So District 25, the leadership needs to appoint that successor. They don't have a committee.
Sure.
The state committee does not recognize them. And there's a bunch of political maneuvering going on. A letter was sent from one of the factions in District 25 that believes that they are the rightful owners of the chair. They send a letter to the Secretary of State's office making an appointment. The Secretary of State's office sides with the state party in saying, you haven't reorganized, I don't recognize this.
Yeah.
So as we sit right now, they are not reorganized. There is no chair. So when we had the leadership elections, instead of 47 district chairs, there was only 46,
Yeah.
which
It's a vote.
led to another 23 set
Yep.
of votes.
Yep.
It took them 5 rounds to elect a chair. But there is a remedy. There is a path out. State law allows the state chair and the state committee to send in someone to run the reorganization to get a district chair elected under the correct rules, under the correct set of circumstances with a parliamentarian. Once that's complete, they can make their appointment. Now, this one is a little less stakes than some of the others, mainly because Cindy Schreiber-Beck was essentially in her lame duck period.
At that stage.
So she had served her last session. She was up for re-election next summer.
I see.
And they won't be in session again. Now, that's not to say that there aren't duties during
Right,
the off season, but
Yep.
you know, in this particular case, it's really more of a ceremonial thing that'll occur before next summer.
Okay.
But it also does put whoever is selected in sort of an incumbent role as they go into an election. So there's a lot at stake, and that's why
But
these district things matter a lot.
You say incumbent. If that happens, though, it goes against their term limits.
Yep.
So then they would already have served a term.
Yep, and that's the whole point. Any fraction thereof is a full term
Right.
under the way that the law has been interpreted so far.
District 40 went through that recently with Randy Schobinger.
Yep, same situation.
It was basically the same situation where
Effectively.
they had to appoint somebody, and it was going into election.
And what's going to happen with that, because of that, and we saw it in 38, we saw it in, I believe, 24 as well. What you'll see is more ceremonial appointments. You know, Cole Christensen, I believe it was in 24 when he was moving, he got married and he was moving to Missouri. when he left the legislature, they actually appointed his grandma to serve
gotcha.
out the remainder of that term,
Yeah.
which is a fabulous thing. You know,
Yeah.
Grandma Rose, who many of us in conservative circles in the state know her. It was a wonderful appointment.
Yeah, and probably had
so
no-
there's some things like that are going to occur, but yeah, it's a big deal because even though it does set up incumbency, you're burning a full 4-year term over 9 months worth of no action.
Of not
And
doing-
that's not the best bet if it's somebody that wants to be there for a couple terms.
About the only thing you might have to do is get called into a special section
Yeah.
to fix the governor's
the
veto. So, but
Yeah, well, I mean, if you go by the Attorney General, it's fine,
it's
right?
all good.
Yeah.
But who knows? It's been a good discussion. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. I'll do it anytime.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Really appreciate it. Thank you to anybody that tuned in today. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll be back this Thursday, 9 a.m. for more conversations. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.